Well, who would bet against Wrexham in the Premier League? Ryan Reynolds there on the pitch after their latest promotion. That is Wrexham's latest promotion. 3 successive promotions now in a row. And Humphrey Ker, one of the men who's masterminded this incredible ascent of Wrexham, is with us on the Sports Agents. First of all, congratulations on your promotion to the Championship. Does it still give you a tingle when you hear that, the Championship?
Yes, 100%. Because that felt like kind of... That was the Wild West for us. We always thought, League Two, League One, that's within our powers to deliver. But kind of Championship felt very, that's when you're swimming with a really big fish. And Rob and Ryan had often, particularly Rob, had been going on about the Premier League, but we always kind of collectively were like, no, of course, we talk about the Premier League, but really, League One, let's focus on that. And then suddenly here we are, one promotion away from the Premier League. It seems quite daunting in many respects.
Can you believe it? Because I'm guessing on the one hand you can't, but then on the other hand, you know how hard you have all worked to get yourselves to this stage.
Yes, I mean that's a very good point. I mean I think we do collectively pinch ourselves a lot, but then ultimately you find yourself going, well, yes, but of course we did work very hard, and we put the time in, and we put in place our structure that we thought would get us to where we wanted to go, and then have been rewarded by, you select the right people, you empower them, you support them, and then actually it's not that surprising that they deliver in a way.
Humphrey, can we just go back and work out how somebody who was working very much in the heart of the entertainment industry,
yes,
writing comedy and writing plays and not at all running a football club, big football fan of
yes,
Liverpool Football Club, ends up doing the job that you did and moving to Wrexham for large parts of the year to help orchestrate this. Let's go back to the origin story.
Yes, the origin story really was, circumstances played such a huge part in it, really. I mean, it was 2 weeks into lockdown in Los Angeles. I've been working on an Apple TV sitcom called Mythic Quest with Rob McElhenney. He was my boss there, as was my wife, very importantly.
She's your boss.
She was my boss.
Right.
Yes,
Always it's your boss.
So they were yes, always. So Rob and my wife Megan Gans and a guy called David Hornsby were the 3 kind of co-showrunners of the show, and I actually got the job. I mean, not just because of my wife, but I wasn't supposed to be working on the show. We'd had a policy of like, I'm not going to. She was much more successful than me. I was like, look, I can't just constantly ride your coattails. So you go and be very successful, and I'll continue to sort of bumble around the place trying to get a job in Hollywood. And they started the writers' room, and it's a show about video games. No one in the writers' room played video games. My wife was like, God, I know one big deadbeat who plays loads of Football Manager, which will become relevant in due course. And I used to play World of Warcraft in university and things like that, and that's what the game that the show was based on. So long story short, very long story, medium short, I wound up in that writer's room. And then when we got sent home for COVID, Rob had made fun of me for 2 years for watching football. I would, our lunch breaks would coincide with kind of 8 p.m. kickoffs here. And as a Liverpool fan, as you can tell from my thick Bootle accent, I watched, in particular, 2019, we watched Liverpool 4, Barcelona 0 in the writers' room during the lunch break. And we actually extended our lunch break because I'd spent ages explaining to everybody the context, and and they were like, why are you watching this? Because your team's lost and they've got Messi and that's the one player we've all heard of. There's no way you're coming back from this. I was like, well, no, I've still got to watch it. And of course, Divock Origi scores after 6-7 minutes, and they're all like, oh, okay, something's going on here. And then one of the greatest ever football comebacks, certainly Champions League semi-final comebacks happens, and they're all like, oh, I'm starting to see the point of this game that you like. So we go into lockdown. I tell Rob, watch this documentary, Sunderland Till I Die. That will explain to you the relationship that we have with our football clubs in the UK, which is very different to the way Americans approach their sports teams. They love them, and of course they're devastated when they lose,
but they're quite happy for them to move 2,000 miles across country,
right? And they often, a lot of Americans, they follow players rather than teams. Yeah. They're like, oh, I love LeBron James, so I'm a Cavaliers fan, and now I'm a Lakers fan. It's less sort of tribal and ingrained. And again, I'm the worst possible person to talk about this because I'm from Reading and I support Liverpool, but you get the point. So he watched Sunderland Till I Die. He loved it. And being a bit of a maniac, he was like, we should do this. We should do, if a team can go from the top to the bottom and cause such devastation to the city they're from and their fans, what if you start at the bottom and took them to the top? Wouldn't that lift everybody? And I was like, well, yes. How on earth are we going to do it? And he said, well, how much could it be? How much could it cost? And I did some very rudimentary Googling, Wikipediaing. So, someone bought this club in the National League for this much money a couple of years ago. So it's probably I don't know, £1 to £2 million maybe you could spend to get one of those teams. And he was like, great. Well, we can do that. I was like, I can't do that. I can't afford that, but you could probably do it. And lo and behold, I was very English and very like, no, this won't work. No one's going to want to see this. No one's going to want to watch a documentary about us doing this. But he just wouldn't be deterred. And so slowly but surely, we accrued an investment bank that handles the purchasing of sports teams and all these different pieces of the puzzle.
But this was all with the knowledge that in the backdrop there would be a documentary following this. That was the important factor in this.
100% is that Rob had gone for a walk with the head of FX, the channel that showed It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, his long-running sitcom in the States, and had been like, I want to do this thing. And so John Landgraf, who was the head guy there, was like, all right, I'll give you 2 series to do it. Like, you can have 2 series of a documentary about it. But we hadn't found a team by this stage or anything like that. But we knew the story's going to be kind of fun. So I then drew up a list of different prospective teams. Wrexham came out on top.
Who were the other teams? Who lost out?
Hartlepool United. We made inquiries at Hartlepool United, but their owner wanted £2 million for the club. Yeah. But Wrexham were fan owned, and they said if you put £2 million into the club's bank account, so we know you've got the money to shore up the team, it's yours for a peppercorn. So of course, we'd rather spend that £2 million on
much more attractive. Yeah.
Players, on renovations, on whatever. Aldershot was one, but that was because they alphabetically came first in the National League. And Rob was like, what about Aldershot? They have had a good year this year. Yeah, they just won the FA Trophy, didn't they? Yes, Kwame Thomas, one of our former Wrexham players, playing in that game. So we looked at a whole different array, and there were different factors: fan base, history, geography, all sorts of things. And Wrexham was the first choice.
Did it? Was it also attractive? Because I can remember talking to the community trust at the time that had owned it and had basically rescued it from going into oblivion. Mm-hmm. And you kind of had to prove yourselves to them, didn't you? And I wonder whether that was actually part of the attraction rather than just handing over £2 million to a local businessman.
Definitely, yes. I mean, I think a huge part of the attraction was we wanted to find somewhere that had kind of suffered a bit, if that makes sense. And obviously, sadly, there are lots and lots of football clubs across the country that have and do. But we knew the history of, with Alexander Hamilton and then some of the other Moss and Dickens, some of the other owners. The club had been quite ill-used for a long time, certainly in the eyes of the fans. And they had ridden to the rescue. People had mortgaged their houses, they'd sold cars, they'd walked up Snowdonia, they'd done everything to raise money to save the club. And the feeling that attachment that grew out of that sort of trauma for them was a really powerful draw.
Gabby, can you just give me 2 minutes to do the geek thing with Humphrey here? Can I? Because you might, I don't know whether you play Football Manager, Gabby. I'm guessing not. So I'll just do the geek thing with Humphrey. Is that rumour then that you would play Wrexham on Football Manager when your wife was forging her career and you were bumbling around at home?
Yeah. Yes. 100%.
Always Wrexham.
So.
Or did you start off unemployed and then see who would?
I'd done that a few times, certainly.
Yeah,
certainly.
Me too. Yeah.
So my first connection to Wrexham was a match of the day, 101 great FA Cup goals video,
right?
That had kind of like the Coventry donkey kick, free kick, and Ronnie Radford and all that, and it had Mickey Thomas scoring against Arsenal in 92, and the name had always kind of stuck with me. I'd always had like a fondness for that goal and that fantastic piece of commentary on that. Mickey Thomas, the magic little man. At the age of 37 or whatever it is. It was just a name that stuck. So when I would play on FIFA or when I play on Football Manager and things like that, I'd be like, oh yeah, go on then. I'll start with Wrexham. They're a respectable League Two team or whatever. Yeah. They're usually in the bottom sort of tier of what you could play as on those games. They've got more.
Did you get them to the Premier League on Football Manager?
Of course I did. What? What an absurd question. Good. I think I won my 5 Champions League back to back in the mid 2020s in that period when I was playing.
And Rob and Ryan now, by the way, just kind of not even thinking Premier League. Are they looking at Champions League one day, having been introduced?
Do not encourage them, please. If they're already deranged enough as it is, I can't be putting Champions League. Let's start with doing all right in the Championship first.
I always used to say to my late wife that me playing Football Manager was very important for my job because it was brilliant. It was brilliant research. Gave me a great knowledge of all the players that I would talk about, and that worked.
And it gives you such empathy for managers as well, doesn't it?
Right.
Yeah. You'd be like, why are you celebrating winning the Champions League with Carlisle? Well, it will help me on Saturday on 5
So you now have the Championship, as we know, it's a fantastic league.
Yes.
It's so entertaining, and it has some great teams, some great legacy teams in there as well. But it's so competitive, and it's also a kind of double-edged sword. And I know this from speaking to people who are friends of mine own Bolton.
Right.
And, when they've been on the precipice of joining the Championship, there's this kind of dilemma. Well, do we need that? Because we've got to spend so much more money.
Sure.
And now that we're in the Championship, and then we become kind of in that middle tier. We don't know whether or not we want to go up. We don't know whether, so you're in a kind of a situation where you have to invest a lot to stay in the Championship.
Yeah.
How's that going?
Well, I mean, we are. It is a bit of a double-edged sword, isn't it? And you're, especially for a club like us, we've got a 10,000 seat stadium. We've just taken down 3,000 temporary seats because we're actually finally starting work on a 5,500 permanent stand. But we are a small lot. Our match day revenues are not massive. Our sponsorship revenue is very large, and disproportionately large for a club of our size.
And also your digital footprint is huge, isn't it? And we had an away day in BBC Football, Mark, didn't we? And we had to rank the biggest clubs in the country 1 to 20, right?
Yeah.
And it was up to you how you did it, whether you did it on Champions Leagues one or attendances. And everybody who worked in digital at BBC Sport said Wrexham has to be in this list because they have more social media kind of interest, and every time we do a story on Wrexham on the BBC Sport website, it attracts kind of almost the second most amount of traffic.
It's bonkers. Yeah. I mean, the example that I often cited was a couple of years ago. We had this sort of billed as the biggest ever game in non-league, which was Wrexham at home to Notts County on Easter Monday. When would that have been? 2022. And on the Sunday, Arsenal went to Liverpool and drew 2-2, which effectively ended their Premier League title hopes. It gave City the title. A dark day for everybody involved, of course. But both, so you get the respective tweets from Arsenal and Liverpool, and you've got Arsenal, I think, were 2-0 up, and then Liverpool came back 2-2. So Arsenal, a point on the road. Thanks, travelling fans. A very dour, sad tweet. And Liverpool's one was a bit more like, battling draw. Thanks for your, much more positive. Those each got about 1.6 million sort of impressions. Significant in the history of the season and all this kind of thing. We then put out our, the Red Dragons eat the Magpies 3-2, whatever. We've done it on Monday, and that got 5.4 million impressions. And you're suddenly like, what? It's a National League game.
Do you monetize that? Is that
well? We do, I suppose. I mean, when you put it that way, you're sort of like, well, how would one monetize it? But effectively, United, who sponsor our front of shirt, Meta we've got on the back of our shirts, HP on our sleeve, they are not going near League One / League Two clubs, but they know that the impressions, that the eyeballs that are going to see our shirts are vastly greater than
global.
And global. So documentaries watched all over the world. We're going to Australia this summer.
Your pre-season.
For pre-season, yeah.
But even domestically, you end up with more eyeballs.
Yeah,
don't you? I mean, I did. So last season, you played Wigan at home in the first round of the League Cup.
Yeah,
it was 0-0. It was not the most entertaining of.
I remember it well.
Yeah, but that got more viewers on Sky. It broke all their records for first round of the Carabao Cup. And so you're always faced, I think, not you, but the media are in this really interesting dilemma, I
Sure.
suppose, of other lower league clubs will go, or fans of lower league clubs, oh God, this is ridiculous. When are we going to get the opportunity? And yet the media landscape is going, well, there's a club here that brings in the number. It's a bit like Leeds being shown a lot in the Championship.
Yeah.
It's because they bring in big audiences.
Absolutely. I mean, I know our fans. A favourite pastime for Wrexham fans is going into the comments section on the BBC website where someone is complaining about, there's fans
Another
who are
Wrexham
like,
story.
yes, but like I'm a Stockport County fan. I'm fed up of seeing stories about James McLean. James McLean ties his shoelaces. Why are you reporting on this? And then our fans being like, well, thanks for clicking and commenting because you just guaranteed the cycle will continue.
Yeah.
It's a virtuous cycle for us.
So because you are not normal. I don't know what, because you have all of these special circumstances around you. What will constitute a good season next season for you guys in the boardroom? Because consolidation would be the watchword of most teams that go up into the chat. I know, look, Ipswich got back-to-back promotions, but take Plymouth as an example.
Yeah,
they've just about they consolidated one season and went down this season. Getting there, people talk about getting into the Premier League and then coming back down. It often happens Championship to League One as well. It's hard. It's hard to stay, but the expectations on you are different.
Yes, I mean it's an interesting one because we talk in the building a lot about momentum. Like we know that a huge amount of the success we've enjoyed this year was built on the foundations of 2 seasons ago. Our starting 11 on our last, the game which we clinched promotion against Charlton, there's 5 or 6 players in that team. But if we hadn't got a couple of injuries, I think you might have had 7 maybe players starting that game who had been with us in the National League. And so for us, that momentum is really important. And you think, well, weirdly, although despite all the many challenges and we've got infrastructure issues, we don't have a training ground, as our stadium is very small, there's lots of things that make it a little bit more difficult for us at present. This might be our best shot to go through the Championship, or the easiest set of circumstances in which to go through the Championship. Next season there's only, I think, depending on who wins between Sheffield United and Sunderland, there's only going to be 3 teams with parachute payments in the division next year. Whereas any other year you might have 4 or 5, depending on who's gone up and who's gone. With Luton dropping sort of straight through. You weirdly don't have as many as you would ordinarily. But also, I mean, realistically, if someone offered me 10th place now, I'd absolutely bite your hand off. I'd never not worry too much about promotion. I mean, as I say, we're about to pump a load of money into this brand new stand, which is more than a stand for us. It's going to be a club shop. It's going to be offices. It's going to be a whole raft of things that sort of go beyond just having an extra 5,000 seats in the stadium. We've got to do a training ground as well. We've got an awful lot of stuff we need to do. We don't have, our scouting network is essentially Chris Johnson, our head scout, and Phil, our manager. That's sophisticated as our data gets.
Phil,
yeah,
on Phil, and I'm guessing, Gabby, you know Phil with your Bradford connections, do you? I mean, I've known Phil for many years. You somehow have, not somehow, but you seem to have the perfect manager for your club in the sense of, I'm guessing there wouldn't be many who would embrace everything else that goes on around it, and yet his knowledge of lower leagues, his success at bringing teams up, at building clubs, he's able to deal with everything that you throw at him. Yeah, isn't he?
No, I mean he's been extraordinary, and I think again one of the people point to our success, and there's obviously a lot of debate about, have you thrown a lot of money at it? Have you done this, that, and the other? I think the single greatest thing we did was hire Phil and say, you're in charge. This is quite an old-fashioned way of doing things. We don't have a director of football. We don't have head of data or head of scouting, head of this, that, and the other. We're like, you're the manager. You're in charge.
Can he say no to the camera crews at times?
100%. Yes. Yeah. He has complete carte blanche to turn him away. But also he's come to understand. I think at the start he was probably a little bit reluctant, and you see in the documentary he has a long conversation with Rob where I think Rob did impress upon him, this is not like Sunderland Till I Die, because actually this is we control the cameras. So we will, you're not going to be made to look like a Wally. You're not going to get egg on your face. You know, we're not going to be intrusive.
It doesn't
if you tell
serve
us
the
to get
brand,
out.
does it? To
No,
do that?
not at all. And it's become, again, this extraordinary situation where I think the relationship between Rob and Ryan and Phil and our players, and dare I say myself and Rob and Ryan and the players and Phil, we're all so close. You know, it's a very stable environment. You know, it's very rare, I think, for a manager to operate with as little peril as Phil has done over the last 4 years. There's like no point when we've had bad runs has there been anything approaching pressure.
That might happen in the Championship.
It might indeed. Yes. Yeah.
Are you ready for that? And because that can change the dynamic massively in terms of the documentary.
Yes. Well, the funny thing is, I actually think it would be great for the documentary. It would be horrible for us that are living it, but it will make very good television because for 4 years it's been a very touchy-feely, loving. You know, we all hug each other.
It's going to bring out very different sides to everybody's personalities.
100%. Yes. And you know, as I say, there is that proximity. You know, we send the players to Vegas at the end of the season, or have done the last 3 years. We said if you get promoted, you get sent to Vegas, and they have been promoted 3 times. So
they love Vegas.
Yes, but they go with Rob. So Rob is out there with them in his swimming trunks. They're all in there. They're all taking selfies together. And I talked to so many of the players. You know, talked to Stephen Fletcher, or who, you know, very sadly is just departed the club, or James McLean, or Matty James, players that played in the Premier League and all the way down. They're all like, I never met the owner of the last club I was at. Like we never met him. Rob FaceTimes me after a game and is like, oh, you know that bit, and then like, that was definitely a foul. You should have had a penalty for that, and all this kind of thing. And that, as much as the money we've spent, as much as the glitz and the glamour, I think is what both Rob and Ryan have brought. I often make jokes about, you know, so many football clubs you suffer because you have an owner who comes in who's like, I own the #1 rubber nipple business in the world. I make every baby bottle in the Western Hemisphere is made by me. Therefore, and I've made billions doing it. I know how to run a business. Football club's a business. I'm going to run it the way I run my rubber nipple company, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to give KPIs. And if this person doesn't deliver, they're gone. And you know, you this is a winning culture. We do X, Y, and Z. What Rob and Ryan have done for years is they've run sets. TV sets, movie sets, and it's quite like a football club. Got many different departments who all have to come together. A lot of people are servicing the 11 people who are on screen.
The actors.
Exactly. Gabby's picking up. She gets what I'm doing here. And having worked on Rob's sets, they're fun. They're really fun. I've worked on many sets in TV where you're like, this is not fun. This is not a good place. And you still might make a really good TV show, but you know, to make whatever they're on season 47 of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, the reason why it's the longest running sitcom of all time is very funny. It's a fun place to work, and I think Ryan. So
their
authenticity
is authentic. It wasn't like you had to sit them down and say, look, if we're going to succeed here, it has to be about the community. You know,
no, they instinctively knew that. I mean, what I did a lot at the beginning was be like, don't say the Wrexham Red Dragons. Say Wrexham or the Red Dragons, like saying the Philadelphia Eagles Birds. You're running, you're putting an official name and a nickname together at the same time. It doesn't work. You know, and don't say roster, don't say points, don't say, you know. But of course, they pick that up very quickly. Yes, yeah. But the funny thing is, when Rob first approached Ryan, the thing that Ryan was interested in, which Rob was very interested in as well, but Rob was into the sport aspect and the sort of community and what it did for the community aspect. Ryan was purely like, I like being philanthropic. It's fun and it's good for the soul and it's enjoyable. I want to use a football club as a philanthropic engine. So they were very dialed into that stuff from the start. And I think that's where the people of Wrexham generally, where they really warmed to them was because, you know, we started off, our first season we were pretty slow going. It took us until Christmas to really get going. But people didn't mind so much because the lads had already been in and around the community. They've been seeing people. So
is that important in terms of recruitment? Because you potentially, you're being linked with Tom Kearney on £50,000 a week. That's going to change the dynamic, isn't it, within the dressing room? And you talked a bit about data and how simplistic your recruitment is compared to those kind of Moneyball clubs, maybe. Yeah. I think that even the Moneyball clubs admit there's a percentage where you have to understand the player and if they're going to fit into the culture. Your culture, from everything you've described there, is so different, isn't it, to what many professional footballers would have experienced.
Yeah, and it's everything. You know, we've talked a lot about one of our biggest challenges, I think, over the next couple of years is retaining that culture, because, you know, right now, slightly embarrassingly, our players drive to the stadium in the morning, they get changed in the dressing rooms at the stadium, they then pile back into their cars, they drive over to Collier's Park, which is our old training ground, but we had to sell way before the takeover got sold to the FAW, the Welsh FA, and that we now rent it back from the lads, go and train there. Then they get back into their cars all sort of sweaty and muddy and horrible, come back to the stadium, have a shower at the stadium, have lunch there, and then go home. And what that means is that every day at about 11 o'clock there's anywhere between 20 and 100 fans lurking outside the players' entrance. Yeah. They see the players on the way in, they get autographs, photographs, chat to them, you know, they do that twice a day, every day, well, not every day, but, you know, 3 times a week, and then on a match day exactly the same thing. And I am desperate for us to avoid the time that would almost inevitably come where they drive their Bugattis to the training ground
through
a secure gate, and then they get the cans on, and they come in with the Gucci wash bags, and we drive them like in some sort of futuristic bus under the stadium and disgorge them into the dressing room, where they don't need to see anyone other than the security detail. And Ben Foster, who was with us briefly a couple of years ago, played a very significant role in our success. You know, I've spoken to him recently, and he's like, you've got to preserve that. And you can. He's like, because you can say to players, if you sign for Wrexham, okay, you're going to be on, you know, 150 grand a week when we're in the Champions League. There you go, or whatever it may be. But you will. This is not a big cans and Gucci wash bags club. This is one where you are still going to come in through the fans.
I think it's what you think, Mark. But I think there'll be players, and we meet a lot of ex-players kind of in our professional lives who work as pundits, and so many of those characters, I'm sure, would have loved that to have been retained. That connection with the fans, because they are football fans. You know, you look at somebody like Wayne Rooney, who, you know, got as much joy walking out on the pitch and saying goodbye to Goodison at the weekend, who will go to Bilbao as a fan on Wednesday night. Somebody like him, for all his success, got that, you know, that relationship.
I think that shows exactly that, Gabby, isn't it? I think, and by offering them that and still having that, you probably get exactly the right characters,
the people that you need,
want.
Yeah.
We truly. So as I said, this sadly last week we said goodbye to Stephen Fletcher and Mark Howard, who've both been absolutely central to the success of the last couple of years. And, you know, I spoke to both of them afterwards, and they were both devastated because they both said this is you know, Fletch have hundreds of games in the Premier League, played for Marseille, played all over the place, Chomp, you know, hundreds of games in 400-500 games through the sort of the English football league system. And they both were like, I've never enjoyed football as much as I have here. I've never had as much fun as I have here. The interaction with the fans, the interaction with the owners, and just the character of the dressing room, and to get promoted, you know, to have that success. It's a pretty intoxicating combination.
It's Joe. As I said, I've done a League Cup game there. We've done FA Cup draws there. Everybody is smiling.
Yeah.
When it's not a cliche, but everybody is smiling in the ground, the surrounding.
To Wales enough, I think, chappers, really. it's like that all over the country.
I'm just not used to people smiling when I arrive anywhere, Gabby.
We're going to have to finish with you because we've taken up way too much of your time. But I just want to say congratulations on your Manchester marathon.
Oh,
as well.
thank you.
Because you're running that for a charity related to the Club of the Miners
project,
which I know you got bullied into.
I did, I was not. I'm not a natural runner by any stretch of the imagination.
When you described kind of not hitting runners high, you know, I empathise with that. And also running a half marathon, realising you've got to do that twice. So was that shock, the second half?
Yes. Well, do you know what? The big thing was I just got massively dehydrated. It was quite a hot day, and my inexperience cost me, because actually what I did was I just absolutely determinedly stuck to the plan that I'd been given by the man who'd been helping me. I won't name him just in case, because now sounds he gave me a bad plan. But he gave me a great plan, Ian. He gave me a great plan, Ian. But he was like, drink 200 millilitres of water every 20 minutes. You're a big unit, and you take this many gels and do this and the other. But because it was so hot, I was just losing water so much faster.
Yeah.
And so mile 17, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to finish this. Like, this is a real. My legs hurt, my lungs hurt, my heart rate is going through the roof. I need to pee. But then I went to pee and I couldn't pee, and I suddenly had this flash back to my university days of someone telling me, if you get drunk at university and you wake up in the night and you have a pee, sometimes you need to pee again because you're actually dehydrated. You've got too much salt and sugar and stuff, and your body's like, I want to get rid of this, but you don't have enough water in you, so I'm going to tell you need to pee. So it's too much. It's a lot of pee talk. I'm sorry, everybody. A bit gross. So then I started drinking like a 500 milliliter bottle of water every mile.
Oh.
And I
wow.
started speeding up again. I mean, I drank sort of basically about 6 pints.
It feels
of water.
counterintuitive, but it's actually what
yes.
you needed. Yeah.
And then I flew across the finish line. Sort of.
And Rob and Ryan each donated £26,200 to your cause, which is
the current total, because I'm hoping when the documentary comes out, people might give me a little bit more.
Yeah.
Is I think we're up to about 160,000.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's
wow.
incredible.
And that fourth series of Welcome to Wrexham will stream exclusively on Disney+. And if you just stay there, Humphrey, the production team have written a particularly sarcastic line for Gabby to read into what we're going to do next, which as a Liverpool fan, you will probably enjoy.
So, two teams that narrowly avoided facing Wrexham in the Championship next season have 90 minutes to get a Champions League spot. More on how Mark's feeling next.
Ridiculous link.
The Sports Agents
with Gabby Logan and Mark Chapman.